Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Suter. I'm the founder of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and we're really happy this morning to have you here for our federal reskilling event. For those of you who follow ATARC, we're primarily known as for bringing government, industry, and academia together to kind of solve these technology problems, whether it's cloud, cybersecurity, challenges in DevOps. We've dealt a lot with the pandemic and all the challenges we have around there. But one of the reoccurring themes I've seen in my career is this reskilling issue of the federal employees. And I think it's been a challenge. I can just think back in the cloud and, oh, you need to move to cloud. You need to move to cloud. We're going to move to cloud. Well, what happens to the folks? They would always say this is like, I'm in the data center. What happens to me? What happens to me and my family while we're doing this? And I think that we've been going down this road a little bit. We wanted to do an in-person reskilling event about 6 months ago until pandemic turned that up on its head. But we were working with Margaret Weichert out of OMB at the time. And I think we've come to the conclusion that is the best way to handle all these technology problems is to use current federal employees and send them down a perpetual path of reskilling and to handle these new challenges. So we're really excited. We've got a couple panels for you today. We've got a good keynote. We'll be asking a lot of questions. You know, we're really excited about having everybody here today and taking some time out of their day. And without further ado, I will introduce our first panelist. If Robin, if you can come on live and take off your mute. And there she is.
Good morning.
How are you doing today, Robin?
I'm well, and yourself, Tom? Good.
Really excited about your keynote. Maybe if you could introduce yourself a little bit, and then I just enjoyed meeting you the last week when we had that prep call, and I think this is a good way to start this reskilling summit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. It is so great to be here with everyone. I'm truly honored to be invited to give this keynote today. My name is Robin Reese. In sum, I am a person who cares deeply about the topic of reskilling and redeploying in a manner that allows us to continuously be capable of working for as long as we'd like to. I'm going to share the keynote with you, and I'm going to share my screen so that you can see some slides this morning. What you should see in just a second when I share is hopefully a black screen, okay? I intentionally want you to see that because a point of being a visionary keynote is to enable you to picture in your head what I'm trying to describe, and then I will get into more detail. So while I am a federal employee who cares deeply about reskilling and redeploying, I am also currently acting as a senior advisor in the Office of Human Capital at the Department of the Interior. And in that role, I've been working at uncovering the data sources that make us or enable a workforce to reskill and redeploy. And prior to that, I spent the whole prior portion of my career in both the private sector and in the federal government in the IT management space. So doing IT governance, strategy, budget, execution, planning, formulation, and then doing investment oversight. So I have a pretty good lens. I've also helped manage infrastructure and IT contracts across the federal government. And I understand the technology speak. So now I'm in the human capital space trying to understand that dialogue so that we can really connect the dots and work more effectively together. I'm honored today to be in the company of an amazing group of people. Many of today's speakers have been sources of inspiration for me as I worked to make sense of what it truly means to reskill and redeploy. And I've had the privilege of collaborating across disciplines, as I've mentioned, and across missions at the Department of the Interior to bring transparency to career pathing and career advancement. I've found that there are two main components that are critical to success in reskilling and redeploying. The first is culture, and the second is data. Because how can you reskill proactively if you don't know what you need to reskill to? And how can you redeploy if there is a prevailing loyalty to the mission space you grew up in that keeps you in place? At DOI, We continue to encourage our employees to move around between bureaus and across occupations. This is the culture piece. And we're working to uncover the data sources and the relationships between those data sources that will enable the department to modernize our workforce and our organization and our infrastructure for the next 100 years. I can think of nothing more central to enabling the department's mission, or any other mission for that matter, for the next 100 years than a workforce that is what I like to call ever ready. As the world around us changes and changes the way we carry out our missions on behalf of the American public, can we create mechanisms that encourage and enable continuous reskilling and redeploying? Before I tell you specifically what we're doing at the department under the My DOI Career Initiative, I want to lay out the vision of an ever-ready workforce by way of a short story. So thank you in advance for humoring me here. It is 2040. My son Alex is 28, and my son Jake is 26. Each has nearly 20 years of experience in working with remote teams. Alex loves strategy and design. He is always building something. Jake lives for adventure. Back in 2020, these strengths played out in the backyard during a global pandemic, with Alex making up new strength challenges and Jake ruthlessly cranking out double-digit pull-ups with ease. 20 years later, as federal employees serving the public interest, they check their notifications to see what projects they will be working on today. Alex always preferred to know the plan, but learned early on that his plans needed to account for change. Jake was a bit more unscripted, which allowed him to adjust to his brother Alex always making up new rules. These early learnings serve them both well in today's world of work in 2040. Alex's notifications include a heads up on an emerging technology that will change how he delivers on the design he's architected for one of his projects. He's used to this and has learned to adjust course in alignment with the same vision, but with new rules for how to play. Alex quickly schedules a hologram session with his professional coach for later in the day. Jake's view of this day in 2040 looks like this. In addition to having an assignment that he will get read into on his morning run, he sees a new series of pop-up trainings and job assignments that will prepare him to continue against his projects as the tools he works with advance and change how the work gets done. This is nothing new. Jake spends time each day preparing for the future so that he is always ready. Alex and Jake used to hate when their mom said they would never be done learning, but she was right. The Alex and Jake of 2040 are able to be proactive, are highly resilient, and will be ever-ready federal employees working across missions with highly diverse teams wherever their skills are needed for as long as they choose to be contributing members of the workforce. This is their reality because 20 years earlier, a cross-industry group of forward thinkers coalesced around a vision to enable a person to target opportunities and to advance towards those opportunities. This cross-industry group understood that it would take them time to build a mechanism that would enable what was at the time a vision of an ever-ready workforce. They worked tirelessly across disciplines to leverage advanced technology, to rationalize and curate content about workforce needs and multimodal forms of learning and development, and to create a mechanism that allowed for personalized and dynamic plans for continuous learning that incorporated future needs. At DOI, it started with My DOI Career, and Alex and Jake's mom, that's me, was passionate about making this future a reality. My DOI Career is part of DOI's response to the President's Management Agenda cross-agency priority goal to build a workforce for the 21st century. One of the pillars of the 21st century workforce recognizes the need to reskill and redeploy resources to meet the changing demands of the mission. And rather than look to those changes as threats, we at DOI prefer to look to those changes as opportunities to build a new culture of employee mobility within and across the bureaus that service the missions of the Department of the Interior. More broadly, across the federal community, we recognize that many of us entered the workforce expecting to climb the ladder and may be surprised to find that engagement and satisfaction in our work comes in both the ability to contribute in meaningful ways and the ability to continue to grow. But what is growth in today's world of work? Perhaps we can grow out and around rather than a straight line to the top. That is how we approached my DOI career offering, which was deployed less than a year ago and is available to both current and prospective DOI employees or federal employees. We started with what we had. This is key. We did not wait for perfection. We said, what data do we have today that we could put in the hands of employees today to make them more capable of envisioning what they would like to do next? That had both its upsides and its downsides. We received both positive and negative feedback. On the positive side, we received feedback on the utility of the tool for recruitment and on the buy-in for the larger vision that we aim to achieve through this tool. On the negative side, the quiz results were somewhat mismatched to reality when a person looked to explore opportunities through what we call the Find Your Path quiz. That was a data limitation. So we worked to continuously expand our data set and refine the logic and occupation suggestions. We are tireless in rooting around to uncover critical sources of data that can someday allow us to give employees what they are looking for, specific steps to take to advance toward a chosen point in their career, and to provide our leadership what they are looking for, an adaptable, resilient, and ready workforce. It turns out this vision that I articulated through the story of my children is happening today. It is an emerging condition of our working world today. At DOI, our employees have had to adapt to leverage new remote collaboration technologies from their time zone, their work location remotely, their device. Some of the low value work we were doing has dropped away because we aren't in the office to do it. Think filing cabinets, printing and stapling presentations for meetings, scanning signed documents. In some cases, that has freed us up to be truly collaborative and more effective. And in other cases, that has freed us up to do more cross-servicing with fewer people, leaving room for some to consider alternate opportunities where workforce gaps are known. Our employees want to remain DOI employees. They want visibility into opportunities. They want to know what they can do to increase their likelihood of achieving career goals. And my DOI career in its current form is there for these people to encourage them to pursue and to look around and to learn about other opportunities. But it was not quite ready for this time. My DOI career aims to deliver the experience of a continuously reskilled and redeployed workforce by serving up information that allows them to chip away at a simple equation. Can we look at it as A plus B equals C? Can we understand that I am a full profile of learning and experience and work and interests, and that there's a target that I want to achieve for my career sometime in the future. And I just need some platform that allows me to understand, what does B entail? What are the steps and experiences and opportunities I need to take advantage of in order to prepare myself as a candidate for C? For now, we expect that my DOI career will continue to support recruitment efforts. And we expect that employees can learn something about the requirements for their desired next steps, and then they'll go on their own and fill in the pieces of this equation. of their own volition. But I propose that it's not so far off to achieve a more near-term mechanism to suggest opportunities for growth and advancement as we know it today. Notice at the top of this slide, my DOI career has now changed to perhaps my federal career. As I hypothesized earlier, the barriers are with culture and data. From a cultural lens, might we consider making suggestions that make it easier for employees to explore on their own, navigating more quickly to relevant resources that empower them to build resiliency in themselves? From a data lens, might we consider relating to each other so that we can leverage a wider array of data sources? And can we leverage that data via APIs in an ephemeral way that reduces risks for privacy and security? How can we be creative now while architecting toward the vision of the future? And what will it take to enable a vision of a continuously reskilled and redeployed workforce? One that is continuously looking to the future while also addressing the real changing skill needs of the day. We each, you each, need to identify a piece of the equation that you can contribute to and chip away at turning that data into information that is dynamic and empowering to both employees and organizations. And I know you're ready because you're here today participating in this Reskilling Virtual Summit. Today, you will have the opportunity to hear from many whom I've come to respect, admire, and learn from. I expect that we will have the opportunity to learn from you as we work to collaborate across industry, government, and academia, and so on. And I am certain that each of you will look back in 20 years and see where your piece of the puzzle slotted in. I am even more certain that if we combine our strengths to work together toward a vision of continuous reskilling, that we will advance toward that vision at an Olympic pace. I challenge you to consider the vision of an ever-ready workforce, each of you still very much a part of it, and make it so in every move you make. Thank you so much for being here, for being part of this critical conversation, and for chipping away at this equation, A plus B equals C. Because in the end, I truly believe it is not about winning the race. It's about who you helped cross the finish line.
Thank you, Robin. That was fantastic. When Alex and Jake are 20, 28, and 26, I was like doing the math. Am I going to be in a nursing home by then? I was just thinking of Ready Player One, which this is the less dystopian version of Ready Player One, which was a great book, okay movie, great book. But maybe we're in the beginning stages of that now with this virtual learning, it seems like, right? It's just different.
Yeah, I think that we oftentimes miss the forest for the trees or miss the trees for the forest, that we don't realize that we're in the situation that requires us to be more nimble, right? We're there today. We've been talking about it for a couple of years, so I'm really happy to see that we continue to collaborate and move the ball forward here. But sometimes we don't really see the need to do anything about it until the fire's on our doorstep. And I would posit that with the pandemic, the fire's here on the doorstep. And we all realize that we're living in some version of the future vision today, and that some people are experiencing displacement as a result, and some people are experiencing opportunity as a result, which makes it, I think, more relevant and timely to put yourself in this picture and try to figure out how to collaborate to move the ball forward.
Right. And maybe finally, for somebody, the federal employee in the last third of their career, where do you compare and contrast where you are in the first third of your career? Different goals? Is it they still want to learn? I mean, what are the differences there, if any?
I have experience through the lens of my mother, who is in the last year of her career, who has been retirement eligible for 15 years already, that it's not necessarily the case that once you're retirement eligible, you actually want to retire. Many want to continue contributing.
Right.
The difference is in how they can contribute, right? And so perhaps it is that they don't want to work full-time and have a leadership position, but they want to advise. Those opportunities are there. Do they know about them?
Yes.
Right? Do we have to be so worried about the workforce aging and getting ready to retire? Or can we enable those workers to continue working in a way that suits their lifestyle that they intend while growing the workforce of the younger generations? I think yes.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we've been talking about this workforce tsunami of people leaving for 15 years now, and it just hasn't happened as much as we think. People stay engaged. Maybe they're a contractor. They consult back to the agencies. A lot of people that retired that I know in the last 10 years are still working.
Right.
So very, very interesting.
That's exactly the point of, for as long as they desire to continue working, let's enable them to continue working and contributing.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. And we appreciate your time and the effort that you put into that. I think it's a great way to kick off this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robin. And that was Robin Reese. Great way to kick this off. Enjoyed that a lot. I think I learned a little bit. So we have a couple panels for you, and we have a couple of moderators, and they are actually both named Nicole. So I need to get straight on this. My next introduction is to Nicole Grisco, who's a reporter for the Federal News Network. Nicole, if you can come online here and take your mute off. How are you doing today, Nicole?
I'm doing well. How are you?
So where are you quarantining from today?
So I am actually quarantining from Portland, Maine. It is a new location for me, just within the past week. So still getting used to things.
Well, I have been to Portland, Maine a few times, and usually it's about this time of the year. It's actually probably about the best time. You actually get some sun and the weather's beautiful, and it's just beautiful up there anyway. And I'm a big microbrew person, so there's a lot of, you can do pretty well there.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's kind of cloudy and a little warm today, but looking forward to it.
Great, great. Well, I'll let you look forward to you moderating this panel, and I will log off, and you can introduce everybody, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tom. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And thanks to ATARC for having me and hosting this summit on a great topic. I'd ask our panelists now to turn on their video screens. All right. I think we're slowly getting there. So we have, for our panel today, 3 great people who I'm really excited to hear from. We have Adam Grant Nesher. He's the director of GSA's Infrastructure Optimization Center of Excellence. We have Roland Edwards, who I don't quite see him in person yet. He's the Deputy Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of Homeland Security. And we also have Doc McConnell, who's a cybersecurity policy advisor at the Office of Management and Budget. And we're talking about reskilling, as you know. From my perspective, this has really become a priority, I think, for many within the past year or so. But, you know, like everything in this current environment, I think the mindset, the approach has maybe shifted a little bit, and that's our focus today. So we've asked our panelists to think about how the virtual environment has changed your approach to reskilling in recent months and what you're doing about it. So that's where we'd like to start with our group. And I think we're going to start with Doc, who I think will be able to give us a good government-wide perspective here. So Doc, can I have you unmute yourself and introduce yourself and tell us what your priorities are?
Terrific. Good morning, Nicole. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, first of all, let me just say a quick thank you to Robin Reese. I thought that was a terrific keynote and a great way to kick off our discussion about reskilling today, and the importance of being adaptable, whether we're talking about reskilling in general or specifically reskilling in a virtual environment. My name is Doc McConnell, and as Nicole said, I'm a cybersecurity policy advisor at the Office of the Federal Chief Information Officer at OMB. I lead IT and cybersecurity workforce issues, which includes reskilling and training efforts like the Federal Cyber Reskilling Academy we did last year, and I'm co-leading the data science training program that we have going on right now. I'm here to talk to you today about some of the reskilling efforts that we have led in the past, what we're doing right now, and a little bit about what we've learned about transitioning into an all virtual environment. But let me start off just by talking about the why of reskilling. Reskilling solves two challenges that we see at the exact same time. First, we know that we have critical skills gaps in the federal workforce in areas like cybersecurity and data science. And second, as we continue to modernize and we're able to automate transactional activities, we know that the nature of many federal employees' work is changing. So reskilling lets us attack both of those problems, both providing professional development and reskilling opportunities for our existing employees and creating a new source of talent to fill our most critical skills gaps. This work ties, of course, to the President's management agenda and our strategic goals, including IT modernization and developing a 21st century workforce. And one of our maybe highest profile ventures into reskilling happened last year with the Federal Cybersecurity Reskilling Academy. We piloted a program to train 50 people in cybersecurity, including federal employees with no IT background at all. The goal was to set up an intensive boot camp style program to get them ready in just 3 months to support the federal cyber mission. Well, we learned two things from this pilot. One, there is huge demand for this program. This is something that the workforce is hungry for today. And second, we saw really positive results in terms of capability development. We learned that this works and that people really can develop those skills in just a short period of time. So this year we evolved our approach to tackle data science. And specifically, we wanted to look at upskilling federal employees in data science skills, building on that expertise that they already have and enabling them to develop new skills and apply those skills in new ways to their agency's real life business challenges. So this year we're looking at 60 employees over 6 months at 8 hours per week, and we've learned it will be entirely virtual. This includes 4 months of online training in data science capabilities and a 2-month capstone project where they're applying their skills. And we're building on the successful program that was run earlier this year at the Census Bureau and partnering with the CIO Council to make that training available more broadly across government, because we know that these reskilling and data science challenges aren't just limited to one agency. They're something that everybody's grappling with. Of course, we did not originally plan to run our data science training in an all virtual way. We were actually planning for a hybrid approach that included online learning, but an in-person capstone program where everybody came together into one space. We wanted people to be together, building community and learning from each other. And the all virtual environment isn't exactly what we envisioned, but we put our heads together and realized that in addition to being able to reconfigure the program to achieve our original goals, we actually found some benefits to moving into a virtual environment. First, we can accept any federal employee into this program now, no matter where they're based. There's no need to prioritize DC area employees or just those employees who can secure travel funding. We're also able to leverage native virtual training materials that are optimized for this environment and optimized to be delivered to large groups at a low cost. And finally, we get an opportunity to prove live that our group can learn these skills and apply these skills to real life business problems. And that means that we're one more step down that road of proving that the federal government has the capability to scale its remote data science workforce and its capability to reskill remotely. So I'm looking forward to getting into more detail about these programs as we move through the panel. Thanks, Nicole.
All right, thanks, Doc. We are already getting questions about the data science reskilling program, so we'll come back to you with some more on that. If I can have Adam introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're working on.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Grant. I am a director of infrastructure optimization for the GSA Centers of Excellence. The GSA Centers of Excellence were created by the Office of American Innovation to accelerate IT modernization across governments, to improve public experience, increase operational efficiency, and reduce legacy IT spending across the government. What that means in practice is that we are a team of subject matter experts on the issues of infrastructure optimization, cloud adoption, call center management, data analytics and AI, and we are embedded across the government in, at this point, about a dozen agencies, working with their staff to support them on their modernization efforts. Over the last few months, obviously, that revolved a lot around remote work, remote reskilling, and training. One thing that I've learned personally, just working with my agencies, is that the challenges that are presented by COVID-19 are very, very different between each agency. Each agency has their own security standard that they need to meet. Each agency has their own culture that they need to work with. Each agency has their own baseline that they need to work out of, which means that the kind of pivots that each agency needs to support its workforce across differs greatly. My goal in this talk would be to slightly expand the concept of what reskilling means. You generally hear the term reskilling when it comes to training federal employees with new skills, training federal workforce onto new specific tasks, and that is important and an extremely heavy lift. What I'd like to talk about more is the teams that support this effort. As we introduce new technologies into new agencies, we encounter the same three barriers that we do whenever we deal with IT modernization. The difference is that as we're looking at an attempt to pivot a great distance in a really short period of time, each agency has to cover a very different distance. Fundamentally, those three challenges are the acquisition side. For an example, an agency that I work with actually on a regular basis had about 5% remote workforce, which means that their VPS licenses handled a couple hundreds of employees. As the challenge of bringing tens of thousands of employees into this VPN to be able to support their training, support their day-to-day work, they encountered a not surprising but standard effort of, we now need to acquire a very large number of VPN licenses. Generally speaking, acquisition in federal government is a very long and very old tradition and discipline, but there are new skills, new approaches to acquisition that allows you to create fairly agile acquisition vehicles. The problem is that a lot of these agencies haven't changed the way they do acquisition in decades. So I would argue that this is also a reskilling effort. The introducing agencies to how acquisition can be done in a way that allows them to accelerate their response and meet challenges without exposing the agency to risks of corruption. On a very, very close side of that is the security challenge. I mentioned earlier that each agency has their own need to meet their security standards, and these differ greatly. However, an agency can develop the necessary skills within its CISO shop to be able to create streamlined approaches to, let's say, ATOing SaaS solution as we introduce online meeting, chatting tools, all of these tools that were not necessarily relevant or widely dispersed. The effort of even getting those approved is, in some agencies, a major lift because they're used to traditional ATO process that can take months. If your entire agency has moved to remote within a span of weeks, you're stuck. The third challenge that I've seen as technologies across government are going through a lot of efforts of onboarding, distributing, and releasing new applications, which then the reskilling team, the human resource team can take and train on. We get stuck with the fact that these teams are not used to absorbing new responsibility, absorbing new skills. A great number of them don't even manage SaaS solutions as separate from in-house solutions. These are skills that don't necessarily exist across federal government. And to me, that needs to be looked at as part of the umbrella of reskilling challenges. A haphazard release of an insufficient or unsupported tools will impede your user base adoption. This is not a big revelation. My goal here would be to discuss how reskilling efforts can expand to include these three groups to support the ability of agents to pivot as new and time-sensitive challenges come up. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Adam. And Roland, with the Department of Homeland Security, like Adam mentioned, agencies are dealing with different things. Your agency is, in some cases, very different from some of the others that we might be familiar with. So what are you working on at DHS?
Hey, thank you. So I first want to start off, like Doc, I want to echo that the DOI presentation was just a great way to kick off this session. So just really appreciate being able to listen in on that portion of it. Ultimately, reskilling, right? We need to figure out how we package reskilling and sell reskilling so it doesn't feel like we're taking our most junior workforce and we're trying to retrain them for other jobs, right? So reskilling is really about how do we keep and retain top talent? And so as long as we can keep selling it in the right way and promoting it in the right way, then folks won't feel like there's a negative connotation that comes along with reskilling. You know, oftentimes it's, you know, considered to be abolishing jobs. And sometimes that's just not what it is. And the pandemic is just a great example of how the federal workforce moved very quickly to try to make sure that we were able to provide meaningful work for staff who, you know, their day-to-day jobs, as was mentioned before, may have involved a lot of routine office functions, but now we've got to figure out how we transition that. I'd also just like to point out that it's not just the fact that, you know, you might have had an executive assistant who may have been doing a lot of, you know, hard copy packages, because I'm sorry, I have to admit, I'm one of those folks who I love hard copy. I need to feel the paper, and I still actually read books. So I'm sorry, e-readers and all of you folks out there who love those, but that is, I like the physical feel of a book. But as executives, we've had to actually be trained as well and reskilled a bit, because now we're using Microsoft Teams. We're getting packages electronically. We're having to sign them electronically. So reskilling kind of has a whole different and evolved connotation, I think, in this new pandemic world. And quite frankly, where the future of work is going to take us. So I'd love to think about this in the terms of the future of work. So that being said, we have a number of things that we've been kind of forward leaning on as a department. And so we've had just great support from our departmental leadership in terms of what does a new cyber personnel system look like? And part of that talks about how do you value work that folks have learned on the job, or that they've gone out and gotten a new skill or certification, as opposed to having to have a degree. And how do you then make the best use of that at work, whether it's project teams or what have you. So really taking some of those things that we've been looking at and putting them on steroids and fast tracking them is some of the things that we're looking at. We also have in each of our lines of business, so I want to be a little selfish for a minute and talk about what we do for management. Each one of the lines of business really, and when I say lines of business, I mean like HR or IT or finance or procurement, has their own academy where they're taking care of their own. They're training folks, they're developing career path guides, so people actually know how to get from point A to point B in their careers. And again, a lot of that was in-person learning. We've had to move very quickly to evolve that to virtual learning, to allow folks to be able to take the opportunity. They're not having to commute. It's a great opportunity for folks to spend some of that time, except for those parents who are now having to homeschool, which again, for all of you parents, bless you. What I would just say is, it's a great opportunity for us to really make that shift and make it very quickly so that those learning opportunities are available for folks. This is a great time for people to think about their careers and expand their knowledge and skill set. We have a majority of our workforce are frontline though. And so what are we doing for our frontline folks? And that's a critical piece that we need to think through. I think that as we look at some of our components that have some of our entry-level positions, they actually sell their entry-level positions as a foot into the federal service. And they expect a certain amount of attrition as folks move on to other jobs. And part of that is about how do you make sure they're trained and they feel capable, and they actually know that when they come in that there is another job that they might be able to apply for because they now have a foot in the door in the federal service and they've been trained in a certain level of competence, and they can move to another position. I think that technology is going to be a rapid innovator. Is going to move us along. And this is quite frankly an opportunity for the federal government to not only kind of catch up with industry, it's a great opportunity for the federal government to actually lead industry in how we make sure that our workforce is able to work effectively and efficiently, which they have been with the pandemic. You know, there's kind of a saying, never let a good emergency go to waste, or a good crisis go to waste. This is the opportunity for the federal government to really step up and focus on how we continue to make sure that we can, again, keep and retain the best workforce in the future. And part of that is going to be, a huge part of that is going to be about reskilling.
Great. Thanks, Roland, for that. I'd like to start with you with another question. You mentioned that a lot of your workforce, I think you said earlier, something like 80% are in the field, they're frontline personnel. How do you deliver training to them when they're not necessarily sitting in front of a desk, in front of a laptop, 8 hours a day?
Yeah, it's really difficult. You have a number of our components that actually have training centers. So if you look at our law enforcement folks, maybe they're being sent down to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, but that's an in-person training. And how do you continue to deliver that in person? But even with that, we're trying to figure out how do we move some of those trainings virtually, so that when they get down there, the only thing that they have to do while they're there are those pieces that have to be taught in person. But it's a difficult challenge for us because oftentimes these are not folks who, to your point, that quite frankly, they don't even have an office that they report back to sometimes. They're in the field, they're in their cruisers. And so it's a notion of, do we expand our training so that some of it is available on their personal computers? Are we issuing them devices, or do we have training centers or offices where they can touch base and there are computers that are available for them there to be able to do that? I mentioned the HR Academy that we've established. One of the original downfalls, I think, of the HR Academy is that our workforce is not here in DC. Our workforce is all over the country, but the HR Academy courses were primarily being taught in person. This virtual world has moved us very quickly to being able to deploy these to a virtual space, and it's been extremely well received by our components that have offices that are not located in the DMV. And just real quick, that's the other caution that I would have, is oftentimes we focus our trainings and our developmental projects in the national capital region. And I think that that's something that we are definitely going to have to get away from very quickly.
Yeah, Doc, you mentioned that was actually a pro of moving to a digital virtual space for this upcoming data science reskilling program that you're going to be launching. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that capstone project might look like? What kinds of things you anticipate the participants actually working on, and how they might do so virtually?
Yeah, great question, Nicole. So one of the things we know about adult learning and professional training opportunities is that it is great for people to be able to passively take in information and learn new things through virtual classrooms, but you're really not going to get those skills to stick unless the participants have an opportunity to apply them. And ideally, you want them to apply the skills that they're learning to real-world problems, things that they're really dealing with on a day-to-day basis in their agencies. So the way that we've structured the data science training program is to have a 2-month capstone where our participants are formed into teams based on their home agency. We asked every participating agency to submit 3 to 4 names of people who could participate. Those people will be joined into a group. using production data from their home agency and applying the skills that they've learned through the training portion of their program. So there's a lot to be learned yet about what data sets they select, how exactly they organize themselves, what problems they choose to solve. We don't think that there's going to be any trouble coming up with those options, but we really look forward to the participants driving those decisions so that it's something that they are personally interested in. But we have started to explore the possibility that we can do something very real time, very live, very meaningful for these participants, like some of these new COVID-19 data sets that have been generated. Are there ways we can use this capstone program to analyze the data about the situation we're all in right now that could make the federal government more resilient and faster to respond to some kind of crisis in the future that forces us into another virtual forward environment? So more to come as we learn more throughout the program.
Okay, great. And Adam, I think you kind of touched on this concept of reskilling as culture change or vice versa, perhaps. What kinds of things have you learned from perhaps some of these agencies that you've been working with in the Centers of Excellence about that culture change management piece when it comes to reskilling for, acquisition, technology, all of that you mentioned?
So we have some very, very capable people. Oh, sorry, thank you for the question. We have some very, very capable people who specialize in change management and technology adoption across organizations. I've seen them work in a couple of agencies, and most of the work is done in what I'm going to refer to as traditional change management, which is taking a solution out and making it available to the employees as a whole, and then building the adoption mechanism. And these are tried and true techniques. I'm sure Doc can walk us through them, of starting with early adopters, finding your change element inside each larger group of the organization, getting their buy-in, getting them to push and become your champion of each new solution as they get adopted. This is, I believe, again, very traditional approach to change management at this point. I'd say that when it comes to changing the way IT shop works, the way acquisition shop works, and the way security shop works, those methodologies tend to fall behind. Usually when you work with an organization and try to introduce new technology, you get a lot of immediate buy-in on, we need, as a business, as an organization, we need our employees to start using this and this tool to finish this and this task so they can meet their day-to-day requirements. So the buy-in for that is fairly immediate, and we get a lot of effort. Things where we find that we're have to put more effort are places where that's fantastic. We're gonna have to work with your acquisition operation shop and change the way you buy things now, or we're gonna have to change the way you approach security. Roland mentioned earlier the notion of how do we deliver training to people who are don't have GFEs assigned to them. Several of our agencies don't issue GFE. That was not a necessity. People come to work and they work in their office on GFE, but then they go home and that's it. So there was no need to issue laptops to people, for example. So those organizations are going through the same process that Roland's team has gone through of how do we make training available through people's personal equipment? How do we do that securely? And again, we're work with multiple agencies on building those mechanisms, those workflows. But the challenge is, this is fantastic. We'd love to work with you. We need you to bring your CISO shop inside. CISO is not a blocker for innovation. CISO is an empowerer of innovation. Another piece that people tend to drop a lot is that as you bring in these new technologies, suddenly your CISO shop is also responsible for training people, or at least making rules for people on how to use these new technologies safely. Most of these CISO shops don't understand that reskilling is in their wheelhouse. Their job is to approve and control safety. It's also about managing and training your workforce to work safely. And building those bridges is a lot of what we do. So I'd say that taking the traditional reskilling approaches, reapplying them towards those three centers that are involved in technological innovation, especially quickly during this kind of event to build the standard ability to pivot. Have your sister shop be able to react quickly, have your X shop be able to react quickly, have your tech shop be able to react quickly, can build the necessary toolkit to reskill an organization in an emergency.
Great. And I think that touches a little bit on, a point that Roland made earlier about members of management learning how to do their jobs differently, things as simple as maybe signing a package virtually. The one thing that I've heard during the pandemic, and I know this is potentially a challenge that DHS encountered as well, is, okay, what do you do with classified workers who they need to be in the building to do their work? How did you handle that at DHS? Did you have them, for example, maybe stay home and work on training opportunities or something like that for a period of time and then bring them back in on shifts or things like that? Can you kind of walk us through that, Roland?
So what I will say is that our Workforce Health and Safety Division was very engaged early on with the pandemic to make sure that we could determine what protocols we could put in place that would actually make the workplace as safe as possible for those folks who actually had to come in and do their work in person. So there were some items that we were able to kind of figure out, maybe that's not something that needs to be done in a SCIF, right? And so maybe some portions of the work, because sometimes people just work in the SCIF 100% of the time because a large portion of their work is done in the SCIF, but not everything has to be done there. The other thing is that we started a cohorting program where we would have folks come in cohorts, and we would still allow for social distancing within the SCIF space and minimize the number of staff who were coming in at any particular time. So that was fairly successful in terms of allowing us to continue to move forward. So to your point, were we able to figure out how to securely deliver or allow them to do that secure work outside of the SCIF space? The answer is no. But a lot of what this is about is really taking a look at the work that you are doing and trying to figure out what actually has to be done in that secure space and what does not, and then being able to then provide as much flexibility to staff as possible. Our biggest issue is really just trying to make sure that we keep folks safe while continuing to meet the critical missions of DHS.
So this is a reminder for the audience that we will be taking your questions, and we have gotten some already, some very good questions, which we will get to soon. So keep sending those in. But Doc, I wanted to go to you to go back to the data science reskilling program, if we could for a second. One of the things that I think we saw from the Cyber Reskilling Academy was, like you mentioned, that the aptitude was there, the participants did really well, but there was that challenge of taking those participants and perhaps getting them into a job where they could, a federal job, where they could apply those new cyber skills. So I wonder if you think that might be a challenge again with this particular program and how you're thinking about that.
Sure. You're absolutely right. I think that there was the hope that we would see the people who completed the Federal Cyber Reskilling Academy, transition that very next day into a permanent cybersecurity federal position. And one of the lessons learned is that what we needed to build into future iterations of our reskilling program is not just that classroom training, even if it concludes with a certification exam that demonstrates skills. You also need an opportunity for somebody to go back and apply those skills and continue that training on the job. And so that's what we built into the data science training program. We have a slightly different population that we're targeting for this program. We are asking agencies, as I mentioned earlier, to nominate people that exist on their staff today who already may be using some basic data science skills or could benefit from some data science skills. These people will come to the program, they will develop their skills, they'll do their capstone project, and then they will go back to the job that they're in right now, that current job that they're occupying, fresh with these skills, ready to apply it to business problems that their agencies already know about. So rather than asking people to transition from the job they're in now into some data science job, we're really recognizing with the data science training program, that so many people can apply data science capabilities to the jobs they're doing now, to allow them to do it better with more of an analytical background, to allow them to make those better evidence-based decisions, and letting them apply the skills where they are now with the knowledge that this has a short-term and a long-term effect. The short-term effect is being able to do their jobs better. The long-term effect is recognizing that there are additional career opportunities and growth and development opportunities for them in the future.
Gotcha. So the focus, it sounds like, is a little different this time. Instead of trying to fill a specific position, a data science position or something like that, this is just more about advancing their skill set and taking those new experiences that they have and applying them to either their current job and maybe whatever comes down the line.
Whereas we have a classification system, we have GS positions that are designated as cybersecurity in the federal government. We don't have that designation for data science. Data science is really a cross-disciplinary skill set that can apply no matter where in the organization you sit, no matter which line of business you support. And we are seeing from the nominations that we're getting people from all different walks of the federal government. And so we're really confident that they'll be able to take this knowledge and apply those skills where they sit today, that they're still filling skills gaps, data science skills gaps. They don't need to apply to a new position in order to put that to use.
Gotcha. Okay. So we're still going to be taking your questions and we're going to get to those very soon. But in the meantime, we do have a few poll questions that we wanted to get to. So we'll wait to have those come up on the screen. But, you know, the first question here, overall, do you think reskilling is important? Hopefully your answer is, I guess, yes, since you're here, but you can take a chance to answer that question now. All right. And yes, the results are overwhelmingly 98% said, yes, reskilling is very valuable. So we've clearly attracted the right audience for this summit here. So to move on to the next question or two here, what is the biggest benefit to reskilling? Is it cheaper than rehiring? It shows that you're invested in your employees, improve operations, you're not sure, or other? And then we have a second question here, which is, what is the biggest challenge your agency has faced when reskilling? Figuring out the skills that your employees already have, that was mentioned earlier, retraining, finding the resources to actually reskill, other, or not sure. And we'll give a moment here to collect some responses. All right, and it's a pretty mixed bag, I think, on the first question. Biggest benefit to reskilling, a majority say it improves operations, with kind of mixed responses on cheaper than rehiring, and it shows that you're invested in your employees. And then for the second question here, also mixed responses. Slight majority for finding the resources to actually reskill is one of the big challenges, and figuring out the skills that your employees already have as coming in second. So we'll move on to some of your own questions, and we do have many of them, which is great. Certification was mentioned earlier, and one participant here is asking for all of you to comment a little bit more about the certification piece to reskilling. The ability to demonstrate capabilities is augmented with certifications, but often agencies and federal programs lack this component. So to any one of our panelists, does anyone want to tackle that one?
Hey, why don't I give it a quick stab? So
Sure.
When I look at our cyber program, that's the one that I would kind of hold up as where I think the future of this should go. So part of this is not necessarily about having to be certified at the end of something. It's really about your demonstrated ability to do something, right? And so we're really trying to figure out what type of real world assessments we want to put in place that allow us to really determine whether or not the employee has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to actually do whatever function we're trying to do. For instance, what if when you're hiring, as opposed to giving a person a static test or just making sure they have 12 certifications. What if you had something like a gaming challenge where, you know, all of the pieces that you needed were in there and you could actually see if the person can think about what the problem is, if they can adjust on the fly. And so it's that kind of innovative thinking, I think, that will make sure that we are actually getting the right people and who actually have the right skills to do the jobs in the future.
Would anyone else like to tackle that one? Doc?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. Thanks. And I agree with everything you said, Roland. I think it's really, really critical to remember that we are moving faster and faster toward a method of hiring, whether you're looking at the private sector or even what's happening within government, at figuring out new ways to assess people's capabilities, hands-on capabilities when they're applying for the job. It's the way we used to do it that we look at how many years of education, how many years of experience, and what the job titles were before. And what we need now, especially in these areas of critical skills gaps where we know there isn't enough talent to fill all of the jobs right now, more and more looking for ways to expand that pool of applicants that we can look at. So certifications are, for some people, a great way to demonstrate your skills. It shows that you know the material, that you took the time to prove it, and now you've got that badge of honor and all of the continuing learning credits that go with it. We've also heard from some of the participants who have gone through our reskilling programs that that certification can be a barrier for them. Maybe there is a specific certification that's associated with a specific training program, and that's not relevant to why the individual participant came to the training program in the first place, or they don't have the time or the resources to put toward ongoing continuous learning to maintain that certification after the fact, but they know that they can go back and start applying those skills on day one when they get back into their job after the training is complete. So I think that certifications are definitely helpful for some people and help to demonstrate that knowledge, but we don't view them as a one-size-fits-all, and we certainly don't view them as a must for everyone to have in order to be considered kind of base qualified for a cybersecurity or a data science position.
Gotcha. All right. And speaking of hiring, we got a question from Amy who asked, are you finding that this is a time that allows you to recruit younger workers fresh out of college or even high school who have grown up with their devices attached to them? And I would also add to that question, how are you hiring and onboarding new employees virtually?
So,
Roland, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like that's a hard question for some reason. I will tell you that the onboarding process was challenging for us. Just the mechanics of onboarding, because it was a very in-person process. You get your ethics training, you come and get briefed, you get your equipment. And so it was all done in person. And we had a 2-day onboarding experience. We were very quickly able to move to a virtual onboarding experience where, and it really is a collaboration across all of the lines of business. And so I just say a big kudos to the department that we all across our lines of business work very collaboratively together. And I think that's going to be the hallmark of how we move forward as agencies in this new environment. We've got to work together. But we literally shifted very quickly to virtual onboarding. In some instances, the employee may come in at the end of their 2-day virtual orientation just in order to meet a supervisor, to be able to put a face with a name in a very safe environment. But then they immediately go back out and they're working virtually. And so we've made extensive use of Microsoft Teams. I feel like I maybe wasn't supposed to say that because maybe I'm putting in a plug for a product, but we've made extensive use of virtual products to really try to make sure that those employees feel connected to the rest of their teams. And that it's a whole experience. So you've got to make sure that that person has an onboarding buddy. You've got to make sure that they understand their duties and there's someone who's assigned to them to really help shepherd them through that process. And so we did try to put that framework in place as well.
Is this something that you have any intel into? Is there something that the GSA is maybe helping other agencies do right now with, hiring, onboarding, that kind of thing?
So GSA's onboarding process, I believe, is internal. It's out of my area of expertise. The places where we get involved in the hiring process is a lot of what we do is help CIOs restructure their shops. So we will suggest a new structure to support new types of services and occasionally work with them throughout the hiring process of those individuals. Unfortunately, most of the people that we hire that way tends to be more experienced, so they wouldn't be high school or recent graduate levels, initially at least. Since mostly we talk about people in the higher management levels of the CIO shop. From the perspective of doing that over the last few months, that has changed drastically. Each agency has their own approach and their own mechanisms, but vast majority of the ones that I've worked with have switched over to either virtual or by mail. So they've been shipping GFEs back and forth, interviewing is done remotely, onboarding is done remotely. And again, this differs very drastically between agencies. Some agencies like GSA, GSA was at 60% remote before this started, and we're probably going to stick around being remote for a while, just almost entirely. Probably, I don't know. It changes on a regular basis. Each agency, we provide specific support for talent acquisition, talent verifications, and just talk back about the certificate questions. Specifically when it comes to technical leadership, we're trying to learn from the approach of the industry and pay a lot less attention to certificates and a lot more attention to accomplishments, which I believe is also part of the presidential change agenda. As we're trying to work for that to get people who are capable and have proven experience and not necessarily with certificate or degrees, said as a person with no college degree. So
Adam, we do have another question for you here from Miriam. Can Adam please talk about some of the more nimble, faster ways of doing acquisition, like you mentioned? From a security perspective, how important is continuous monitoring for that? And what are some of the skills that workers need to utilize it?
So these are two very separate questions. I'm going to break them into the acquisition side and the security side. I'm going to tackle the security side first because it's more exciting. That's kind of the problem, I think. So DevSecOps implementations, and we've seen this in a couple of agencies. We've seen them coming out of the Navy specifically. We've seen them in Castle Run. Beautiful approaches to automating security evaluation of new in-house developed products to the point where an ATO process for a new release that can, in traditional ATO approach, can take months to be approved, can take less than 24 hours. This is accomplished by delegating controls out of the manual verification process into an automated verification process, sticking them inside your DevOps process and automating them. So we get to the point where a developer submits code into a repository, that repository gets absorbed into the security process, get tested, get approved, eventually sits in front of a person who just does less verification, clicks submit, and then plugs right back out to the DevOps pipeline and goes into production, which is beautiful, which is the way I would like everything to work. Obviously, to do all of this, a team needs on the development side to have DevOps skills, to have CDCI skills, to have the infrastructure in place. And then on the CISO skills, and this is what I was alluding to earlier, the set of DevSecOps skills belong on the security side. So engineers on the CISO side need to be able to use, utilize, and champion these efforts. So in some cases, we have seen real ATOs go through this automation process and bring us to a place where you can actually do agile development in government, which is one of the challenges that we deal with. So that was the security question. And there's a lot of reskilling on both security and tech side there. On the acquisition side, and this is again, you're moving slightly outside of my area of expertise to our very, very phenomenal acquisition leads. We have dedicated acquisition people whose job it is to develop new acquisition vehicle and train agencies that we work with to build agile acquisition vehicles. I'm kind of questioning what I'm going to say because this is really not my area of expertise. You can have acquisition vehicles that allow you to issue new tests against the acquisition vehicle so you can buy new things fairly quickly within weeks as opposed to months. these need to be in place. We have our own GSA Discovery BPA dedicated to our discovery effort, which allows us to bring in industry resources into each of our projects relatively quickly. All of these mechanisms, which are way over my head, belong to people who know what they're talking about, but they exist, and GSA COE is more than happy to talk to any agency and kind of give this training in and outside of our engagements.
Okay, thanks for that, Adam. We have about 5 minutes left or so here and a few more questions to get to. So Doc, several questions about the data science reskilling program, specifically a question of, are you accepting nominations for the data science pilot? I believe you answered that already. But is there a deadline for nominations or selection for the program, and when does it kick off?
Sure. So we have good news and bad news about any pilot program. Our nomination period closed last Friday. The good news for everyone who's asking this question is that does not mean that we are done with data science training. Much like with the Federal Cyber Reskilling Academy, that was last year, and you heard me say as one of our top indicators of success at the beginning of this conversation, that we had huge interest in that program. So we would ask you, if you are interested, to reach out to the point of contact at your agency for this training program. If you don't know who that is, reach out to your agency's CIO shop. This is a CIO Council sponsored program, and so we are coordinating with the CIOs of all of the agencies to collect names and see who's interested. And one of the things that's really helpful for us in evaluating whether this will be a single pilot or whether we'll have follow-on opportunities in the future is seeing what kind of interest is out there. So please do reach out. Please register your interest with your CIO. We will be following up with agencies throughout this program and after this program is to complete to assess who else is out there who could benefit from some data science training. With all of these programs, our goal is not to do a one-off, but to figure out if this is something that is broadly applicable, how can we make this opportunity for additional training permanent? And we are thinking about that internally right now. We already know there's been a lot of interest in this program, and so we're brainstorming whether we can put some short-term opportunities into place to hopefully make this available to more people as well. So more to follow, but definitely don't give up hope. We want to hear from you if you're interested.
Great. Okay, that was good. And I imagine that the opportunities will expand, especially if you're maintaining a virtual environment. Many people can participate. I want to get to one last question here, and I think this is one that all three of you can tackle. Do the panelists believe that these emergent reskilling trends provide new federal work opportunities for more matured, experienced workers with significant remote IT experience who are seeking to transition from the private or nonprofit sectors to the federal government? And this person, Michael, is especially interested in DHS and maybe even CISA. And it seems like he's also interested in the prospects of joining these agencies as either a federal employee or a contractor. So if anyone wants to tackle that one to start.
I feel like he kind of called DHS out, so I think I might need to at least kick off. And by the way, just for my fellow panelists, I need to figure out how Adam is able to take complex information and dummy it down so even I understand it, which is awesome. And how Doc is actually able to tell people, no, you can't apply, but it still sounds very nice and like you still have opportunities. So I need to figure out how those skills that are being done. In terms of the last question, yes, what we're expecting right now is that we are going to have the opportunity to have a global workforce. And so with that, it opens up opportunities for us to be able to hire from all segments. We already welcome folks from the private sector. I know that sometimes our hiring processes seem a little difficult for folks from the private sector to be able to get in. But in particular, if you're looking at our new cyber system, which will launch early next year, I think that will be one of the easier ways for folks from the private sector to kind of come in and out of federal service, which is how it's designed. But the base answer to your question is absolutely, it is a perfect time to join the federal government. We need you. we welcome you. And so we're happy to hire from all segments of society for all different occupation types.
We're up against time, but would anyone else, Adam, would you like to address that one quickly?
Sure. The Technology Transformation Services, which is our parent agency, hires from industry constantly. We have 18F, which is an internal consulting agency, which is entirely remote. We are, if you go to Join TTS, just Google that phrase, you will see our openings. We are always hiring, and we are very remote friendly.
All right, great. Doc, I'll give you a chance to respond if you want to.
Thanks. I'll just say quickly that we've been talking about reskilling as if it's a program here or a program there, but really I think a point to take away from this is reskilling is a way to reorient ourselves around thinking about workforce and human capital management. It is the idea that we don't need to be restricted to the old way of hiring, the old way of finding talent, where we're finding the needle in the haystack, that we're looking more holistically at what people are capable of, not just the experience they have, but the interest they have in developing new skills and contributing to the mission in new ways. And that is all to the good, because it just continues to expand all of the people we can look at to fill those critical skills that we have right now. So echo what my fellow panelists have said, join the federal government. It's a wonderful place to be.
Great. I think that's a good place to leave it. And thanks to Adam, Doc, and Roland for participating. Thanks to ATARC for having us. And Tom, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Nicole. That was a great panel. Thanks to you and the rest of the panelists. While we're queuing up our next panel, headed by Nicole Johnson, just wanted to push a little bit of a series that we've been running on, and it's our Thursday afternoon webinar series. And we're working with our partners over at ServiceNow and their thought leader, Jonathan Album, he's been in government a long, long time, and now he's in the private sector. He was formerly the CIO of the USDA, and he's got this very interesting series about the roadmap to resiliency. So he's got a couple of good, it's a little bit different format than what we used to do, but it's more like a fireside chat. So it should be very, very interesting. It's going to be from 1:30 to 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. So please register for that. We'll send some information out. And I will now promptly turn it over to Nicole Johnson. Nicole, if you could emerge on the Hollywood squares here. Nicole? We're trying to get Nicole. I'll just start dancing or something. Hey, Nicole, are you going to get your video? Have an opportunity to get your video?
Yeah.
There you are.
Can you hear me?
And I think one of our panelists jumped onto your video, Alyssa. Yeah, we sent separate links out. There's Scott Cameron. Okay, I can hear you.
All right.
There you are.
We love when technology works. I was playing hide and seek, so I wanted to see if you all could find me. So this is okay.
Well, good to see you. So where are you out of today?
So I am out of Southern Maryland. I'm about an exit up from Andrews Air Force Base. So if you all hear aircrafts flying around, know that I'm safe. This is just the nature of where I live, but I'm excited to join you all today.
Great, great. Well, I'll turn things over to you. Good to have you. And it's our second Nicole. We're like all Nicole moderation today.
Yes, I absolutely love it. Solid name. I'm biased, but thanks for having me. Yes. I will invite the rest of our panelists to go ahead and turn their cameras on while I do a quick little spiel and intro for each of them. But good afternoon to those of you who are on today. Thank you for sticking around. Please don't go anywhere. Hopefully you have a snack and something to drink. I promise you our expert panelists will not disappoint. As Tom mentioned, my name's Nicole Blake Johnson, and I'm the managing editor at GovLoop, and I have the added pleasure of being your moderator today. So this discussion is going to be a nice continuation of what you all have been hearing throughout the morning. So on this panel, we're going to focus on the qualifications and needs that agencies have around reskilling and how they're able to get the right skills in the right roles, whether that's through hiring, as we heard some about on the last panel, or taking the existing workforce and reimagining what's possible. So I want this discussion to be conversational. So I know you all are not shy. I saw some of you submitting questions earlier, so please make sure to get those in. And I know we only have 45 minutes, so let me quickly introduce our speakers and I will turn things over to them so we can dive in. So on this panel, we have Brian Schoen. He's Director of Policy and Resources, G6, Chief Information Office, United States Department of the Army. We have Scott Cameron, who I see camera on. This is lovely. I love when tech works. Acting Assistant Secretary for Policy, Management and Budget, United States Department of the Interior. And we also have Vanessa Graff, Organizational Change Management Lead and Workforce Strategy Capability Steward, Enterprise Strategy and Transformation at the MITRE Group. So to kick things off, I'd like for each of our panelists to briefly tell us more about your priorities and how reskilling fits into the work you and your organization are doing. And so Brian, not sure if your camera's good to go, but since I can see Scott and Vanessa, I think Scott, I might start off with you and then we can head over to Brian and then Vanessa. So I'll turn over to you, Scott.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
You sound great.
All right, that sounds great. So appreciate the opportunity to be with you all this afternoon to talk about some of the things that we're doing at the Department of the Interior. And at Interior, we've got 70,000 employees roughly on an annual basis. A significant number of those are actually seasonals in 2,400 locations. So we're a highly distributed organization. And we are constantly looking for ways to improve the efficiency of the way we operate. And the way you deliver mission is through your employees to a very great extent. So we're looking for opportunities to reskill our employees so they can provide more value added in the work they do and spend less time basically pushing paper. In the way things happened in the 1950s and the 1960s. So our flagship effort in this regard is reshaping the way we manage financial assistance. About 40% of our budget is financial assistance, and we've had a paper-based process up until this fiscal year. We are gradually transitioning to HHS's Grant Solutions technology process, which means that we're going to be able to do a lot more analytical work and be much more efficient in the way we manage financial assistance. So at Interior, that's one of our focus areas, being able to do more higher end work as we evaluate and manage our financial assistance program.
Awesome. We definitely hear that being an area ripe for reskilling and upskilling and bots and all kinds of things. So I have plenty of follow-ups for you, Scott, but I will go ahead, Brian, and kind of, hear from you what your priorities are and how reskilling fits into that. Brian, you on? And no worries, because I've had my tech issues too. So what I'll probably do is go over to Vanessa and then Brian will come back. Oh, wait, Brian, are you on? No, it's okay. It's all right. Vanessa, we'll go ahead and go over to you and then we'll come back to Brian.
Sure. My name is Vanessa Graff. I'm with the MITRE Corporation. We work with a number of different agencies on solving problems for a safer world in our government research and development centers. Prior to joining MITRE, I spent 10 years working on the government side, though, in human capital planning and policy at Department of Commerce, Department of Homeland Security, and Health and Human Services. So I've seen these things at a few different places and get the pleasure of continuing to work on them at MITRE. But I will probably talk about things kind of from a cross-governmental perspective and kind of how the government as a whole is approaching these issues. So I would say right now, with regards to kind of this reskilling conversation, there's three main challenges that are approaching the government. One is this idea of how do we build kind of specific career paths where the qualifications align with specific occupational series, and kind of how to then build that pipeline for these long-term solutions, 10, 15 years into the future. I think some of the strategies that we're seeing cross-governmentally in this area relate to kind of the data science OPM occupational series, the NICE NICE framework with cybersecurity. I know there's some really good work being done in the cybersecurity cross-governmental working group. And then even at the state and local levels, Greater Washington Partnership has done some really good work in this area. The second challenge I would say is kind of this broader issue of how to socialize technologies across all of the occupational series. How do you build kind of those competencies as it pertains to your workforce as a whole when you're adopting something like artificial intelligence? Some of the strategies that we're seeing come out in this area is around like the DHS Stop, Think, Connect campaign and kind of building that base level of literacy for cybersecurity. And then MITRE is actually doing some work in a program called Generation AI, working with universities on how you can build curricula that pertains to artificial intelligence across all occupations. And then finally, I think the third challenge is just this area of how do we build these cross-governmental and cross-functional teams? So when we're looking at implementing DevSecOps, we need to have that communication and relationships across security, IT, software development, and operational groups so that we can deploy things faster and on an as-needed basis. And AI is really requiring that same level of cross-functional involvement. So hopefully that kind of addresses, and maybe Brian's got his audio back up and running.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. See, Vanessa was just talking about technology having to work across, you know, she was speaking truth. So over to you, Brian. We'd love to hear how
Thank you.
you're doing.
Thanks to my partners for filling in, and I also appreciate the opportunity to speak here. So I'll give you a little just quick taste of the Army, and I'll try to be brief, and then we can open it up for some good Q&A. But our Army priorities continue to kind of be along the lines of readiness, modernization, reform, and building partnerships. And what we've really focused on lately is that our people are the ones who help us achieve those goals. It sounds cliche, but it's true. It's not a technology that's going to get us there. It's going to be the people who build the technology. And so we had this thing called the Army People Strategy that was published, and it really focused on acquiring, developing, employing, and retaining talent. And so you'll hear our Chief of Staff, he's our highest ranking uniformed individual or soldier out there saying the Army needs to win the war for talent. So one of my responsibilities is to oversee kind of the Army civilian IT workforce, which comprises of about 15,000 civilian full-time equivalents. And what we've talked about is transforming from what we call the industrial age Army to the information age Army. That's something that we're really focused on. And so to begin that transformation, we really took a hard look inward, and we said to ourselves, well, we can't grow our workforce. That's going to be a very resource intensive thing. It's going to require us to find offsets. So we need to really transform the current 15,000 person civilian IT workforce we have today. And so our very wise three-star General Bruce Crawford, who just retired after 34 years of service in the United States Army, God bless him, he's a great individual. He came up with three very simple terms that we use to describe this effort that we call Quantum Leap. And those three terms are: we are recoding, reskilling, and upskilling our workforce. And really, to do that, we kind of need to reimagine what we want that workforce to look like, not tomorrow, not even really 3 years down the road, but like 5 to 10 years down the road. And, you know, we started real simple. We said we took a pie chart and described the types of skills that we have today in our IT civilian workforce. We said, is that the pie chart we want 5 to 10 years down the road? And we said, no, we're going to need skills that are really in that data and information age realm. And we're going to need to shift the workforce that we have today into those skills. And we also wanted to make this something that was an opportunity for our workforce. We didn't want to make this, it wasn't a matter of kind of pushing certain stuff out of the workforce. It wasn't anything like that. What we decided to do is take the academic and industry approach of really making this an opportunity for our workforce. So this Quantum Leap effort, again, General Crawford gets kudos for the name because it's a catchy name. It's in its very early stages. We have, out of that 15,000 person workforce, we're taking the first 1,000 and we're going to recode, reskill, and upskill them by fiscal year 23. So we're not trying to bite off more than we can chew. We're not trying to boil the ocean. And frankly, many of our civilian IT professionals are already in parenthetical work roles that we already think are priorities. And those are the individuals that will just start upskilling right away. So we kind of skip the reskill stage and upskill them. So I'll leave it there, but that gives you a flavor of where the Army's headed with the Quantum Leap effort. And this forum and this particular panel is a very good fit to talk about it and help the Army learn from our peers where we can do that even more effectively in the coming years. Thank you.
Perfect. You guys have given us so many great things to talk about and follow up on, but I have the most critical question for you right now, Brian, that just came in. Is the orange tea Tennessee or Texas? The people want to know, so now you must answer.
It's the real UT. It's the University of Tennessee. Go Vols.
Oh, I'm so sorry for my Texas folks. We do not endorse or... No, I hear you, Susan. I like Susan. I can already tell the type of bunch we have today. So let me do this. I would like to follow up and start pulling some strings on what you go Tennessee. All right, Sandy, you have fans. So Brian, gosh, you gave us so much there. I want to, like I said, pull some strings on it. You mentioned looking at the pie chart and looking at where you all are today, where you want to go to this, data and information age. I would love if you can kind of give us some insight on what types of skills, what are you all working with today? And when we talk about what types of skills you're looking to grow, can you give us more insight on the data and information, what you all are looking to do there?
Absolutely. So, I mean, in a perfect world, we'd have unlimited manpower and we'd be able to have, plenty of folks across many skill sets. But we honestly took a hard look and we said, if we had to prioritize, what would we call high priority versus low priority skill sets of the future? And again, this has nothing to do with the people in those positions. It's just purely, we looked at it from a function and roles perspective. And we said, well, we need a lot more data managers, systems analysts, software engineers, enterprise architects. Those are the types of skills that we said we need more of them. We have some today, not very many compared to what we need in the future, which meant we had to unfortunately look at, well, what do we need less of? And we looked at those and we said, well, we probably don't need as many telecommunications folks. We probably don't need, we have a large set of what we call customer support folks. And we said, as important as they are, we really probably need to transition. So, I kind of described it at a strategic level as anything that's going to help us transform to that information age. And we're all about, in the Army, taking our data from the, antiquated data centers and really trying to get that data curated into the cloud so that it's getting into the soldier's hands quickly. And it's in a way that can be used quickly by the soldier. Believe it or not, and I'm sure you will, the Army, with as big as it is, it's not just the tactical stuff that land in the soldiers' hands. There's a lot of business systems and things behind the scenes to run this big, Army that we run. And so that requires a lot of folks that are, civilians like me or contractors to also have key data at our fingertips so we can analyze. And so it really comes down to what's part of that information age Army and what skills do we need? And I'll quickly say this last point and then let you continue. You'll hear a theme across all the panelists here, and that focuses on skills. And while that sounds very elementary, it's a shift in the way that the Army thinks. I mean, we're very much, certification based right now. We kind of say, we need somebody with this cert. And then we look for the person, and if they have it on their resume, we're like, they're good. And it's almost like a 0-1 variable. The skills that and what we've learned from industry and academia, some of my panelists can get credit for this, is it shouldn't be that 0-1. We should look at the types of skills that we need. And a really good example, I'll leave it at this, is we needed a really good AI person. And we didn't even know where to go look in this huge army that we have. We scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed, and it turns out there's this individual just who had these different skill sets. He had some certifications as well. His name is General Matt Easley, and he now runs our AI task force. If we had only focused on certifications, we would have never found General Easley. When we started turning to what skills do they have, that's when we found the right guy for the job, and he's made tremendous progress for the Army in the AI world.
Wow, so much more information leads to more follow-ups, but I'll pause. My new friend Andrea asked if, Brian, you could provide a link to the Army's data strategy in the Q&A. Thank you, if that's handy. I'm gonna follow up with Scott, and then I'm gonna come to you, Vanessa. Once each of them have, kind of shed more light on what they're doing, you can help to share, is that what you're seeing with, the agencies that you're working with as well? So Scott, I think you were taking notes intently, probably agreeing with a lot of what Brian was doing, because you may be doing the same thing, but I'd love to hear more. You talked about, the financial side, and, if you can dig in a little deeper about the skills you have today, what you're looking for, and how you all are kind of pivoting and making that transition. Any follow-up there on your end?
Well, thanks for that. And I think one of my colleagues, Robin Reese, may be with us as well. But one of the things that we're doing that Robin has the lead on is helping employees understand career paths at Interior, and how one could develop the skills, the competencies one needs to advance from wherever you are in the organization to your next step, or your next 2 or 3 or 4 steps, and to envision what a long-term career might look like at Interior, and in particular to think outside the box, to be aware of opportunities outside your home bureau, if you will, your home organization, and to understand that we have 10 bureaus at Interior, and it's perfectly fine and perfectly reasonable to explore a career path that would move from one bureau to another over time. Historically, too many of our employees have felt that they only had one branch on a career path, if you will, that they could follow. And in order to improve retention and have more well-rounded employees who frankly can deliver more value to the organization, we're trying to encourage people to think more broadly, and how they might develop themselves more fully, and potentially play a much wider variety of roles during the course of a career at Interior than they might were they to stick in the same chain of command that they were hired into.
No, that's great to hear, and I think encouraging for staff, because it can be discouraging if you feel like, man, I'm sitting here buried in the organization, I have something to offer, but no one knows I'm here. I don't know how to tell them, or have that dialogue. And a question came in while you were chatting. This is a good one from me that it could be specific for you, Scott, and then I'll hand it over to Vanessa to chat as well. But what's the most efficient way that you capture skill sets of your staff? I think that's a great question. If you all have an approach for how do you find that, skilled employee who might be at a bureau and,
It's not easy, at least not, it's not easy with our current technology. We are looking to build employee profiles, if you will, where employees would characterize their skills and competencies, so that at some point we might be able to actually search for people with particular skills. One of the challenges is that it's hard to know today what competencies you're going to want 2 years from now or 4 years from now. And a situation could develop where all of a sudden you want to know someone who speaks Farsi, or all of a sudden you want to know, or you want to find out who in your workforce has paramedic training. And if there is no existing database that allows people to put in information about themselves that at the time they're putting it in might seem irrelevant, but 5 years from now might turn out to be crucial, then it's difficult to have insight into the full range of capabilities of your team.
Yeah, that's good. Vanessa, I imagine you were listening intently and maybe mapping on what you're hearing and seeing. Help us, take a step back, and I'd love to hear what you're seeing with agencies that you're working with in this space.
Yeah, so there's a lot to respond to. I'm just kind of immediately reacting to some of the topics that Scott mentioned. I think that as discussed, there's a lot of challenges with kind of tracking, whether it's through kind of a skills inventory process, whether it's a self-assessment or leveraging the managers to help provide kind of a dual pointed assessment of the employee. And then allowing for kind of a dynamic technology that captures that and provides the information as it's available and current. It's definitely a challenge. I think just broadly to the first question of kind of what skills are important right now, certainly there's so many unique situations across the government. I think overall though, I think we are seeing a lot of demand in the area of artificial intelligence, as Brian kind of was talking about. And I say that from the perspective of both the non-technical skills and the technical skills. I think that a lot of times when people are thinking about the technical skills, they're thinking about Python, R, data science, which are certainly important for building those algorithms and kind of assessing the effectiveness of the algorithms. But I think we also have to think about the piece of how do we understand whether we're tackling the right problem with the artificial intelligence. And for that, the skill sets that are going to be relevant are more around this ability to collaborate, communicate, and really strong critical thinking and analyzing skills. So I think that's a strong area. I will say, I think cybersecurity is also still very hot. It's been an issue for a while. I know Roland was on an earlier panel for Department of Homeland Security. Certainly a hot area there. There's some data around CyberSeek had done some categorization of looking at all of the different breakdown of cybersecurity positions using the NIST NICE framework. And they found that kind of the majority of the cybersecurity jobs are in the operate and maintain or the securely provision categories. So a lot of demand there. So I'll pause for a little bit.
No, this is good. I know it's like we're all just like, oh, this is so exciting. There's a lot going on. This might be a good place for me to ask my friend Alyssa at ATARC if she could pull up a poll question for our attendees. And it should be coming up here on your screen. Yes, there we go. Is your agency currently involved in any reskilling efforts? We'd like to know yes, no, unsure. What is reskilling? That's a good question. We kind of hopped in and when I go over to Brian and he tells me more about recoding, reskilling, and upskilling, he's actually going to help us to define that. And then the other question is, how has reskilling affected your agency? So we'd like to know that if you could go ahead and submit that. So while you all are getting that question in, I will turn to you, Brian. We would love to hear more. Walk us through how that's going to play out with the recoding, reskilling and upskilling, and how you all define that. We'd love to hear more.
Absolutely. I think that it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a huge culture shift for the Army. Like I said, we're usually focused on certifications, and now we're going to say, hey, we really want to focus on skills. And to Scott's point earlier, that's not an easy to do, and I like the way he said that. With the technology we have today, what we're learning from our, again, academics and industry partners is that there are platforms and tools out there that can help you kind of baseline what skills your workforce currently has today, and that's going to be our first step. And I do appreciate I don't want to throw anybody off, but the recode, reskill, upskill, the reason we're thinking of it that way, and I described it to them yesterday, but I'll do it here on the forum, is, you know, there are just certain folks in skill sets that we don't see as the high priorities, and we're going to have to recode them before we even start to reskill them and upskill them. Now, recoding doesn't sound like a difficult task, but when you go to other organizations, remember, I'm in the headquarters of the Department of the Army. When I go out to Army Cyber Command and I say, we really want to drive this culture shift and reskill to these skill sets, they're going to say, well, first thing you need to do is turn Tommy from a 0724 to a 329er, you know, and we're going to go, yeah, that's fine. You know, how do we do that quickly so we can get to the fun part, which is the reskill and upskill? So we're kind of going through the recoding now. We're learning that there are legal ramifications. You have to bring your lawyers in and say, you know, look, the United States Army really appreciates what you've done, but we're also very interested in this new opportunity for our workforce. And what I've learned in that process is folks kind of start to get a little concerned. You know, they start to say, well, wait, you know, why don't you value what I used to do? And we say, we absolutely value it. And look, we could try to go out and recruit and retain these new skills, but the bottom line is that the United States Army has to take the 15,000 people that we have in the civilian IT workforce today and do the best to transform them into the skill sets we need tomorrow. And when you start to phrase it that way and show them that we're going to resource this transformation with, you know, platforms and licenses to things that they can jump on and do virtual training from home, or especially home now that we're teleworking, they start to get a little more excited. And then you start to say, we're also going to align some of these to your performance elements. And if you get to a certain path, you know, on your path, if you get to a certain point, we're going to actually, you know, incentivize and entice you to get these skills. And then they start to look at it like, okay, this isn't one of those old fashioned, we're going to boot these guys out of the workforce and bring in these new folks. This is actually a chance for me to hone my skills and be more aligned with what the Army needs in the future. And so a lot of it, again, is at my level is more that culture shift and trying to get buy-in and what my boss calls ownership. If you start to get the folks out in the Army to actually take ownership of this and jump on board, which we're seeing and we're very, very proud of, then it becomes the kind of thing where we're just helping them achieve the goal that the Army set out. So it's an exciting time for us. We are calling this first 1,000 a pilot. That's what Project Quantum Leap really is. It's a pilot. In no way do I believe we're going to get it exactly right the first time around. We're going to learn lessons across the board, and we're going to get better over time, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, looking at the poll responses, our panelists are not alone in this. We have 75% who said their agency is currently involved in reskilling efforts. And in terms of how reskilling has affected their agency, 50% said in some positive and in some negative ways. 42% said that they were unsure. So it's still, I think you using the term pilot is not off base at all, because everyone's really still learning. Scott, I want to ask you, because I've heard this come up several times that when we talk about challenges, right? It sounds like a reset and a mind shift, not just for employees. We heard Brian say, for someone to say like, what, you don't value my skills? Like, how do you communicate this to employees, but also to the hiring managers and them thinking differently about who is qualified? What does that look like? How do we do that? If you can, you know, give us more insight into that cultural shift side and how you're tackling it with communication, or, you know, changing the hearts and minds of folks. Any tips on how you're doing that?
You know, it's interesting. I think the hearts and minds and the culture are less of an issue than the bureaucracy. I'll give you an example. So Interior, our Fish and Wildlife Service has several hundred national wildlife refuges around the country. And we have about 70 national fish hatcheries. At those facilities, you have both GS employees and wage grade employees. Some of the wage grade employees at those facilities, who typically do not have a college education, frankly, have far superior knowledge, skills, competencies about how to run those installations than the relatively new GS5 or 7 GS employees. And yet, the current system that depends so much on educational requirements prevents these wage grade employees from moving into a GS position that they're frankly quite capable of performing at. So one of the things that we're very interested about a recent presidential executive order that de-emphasizes educational requirements is the opportunity to open up new horizons for some of our highly qualified wage grade employees who may know more than some of the GSers that they're dealing with, and yet who have been held back in their career because they didn't have a BA or BS that they could hang up on the wall. And our staff intuitively understand this. An analogy in the Army situation would be a 22-year-old second lieutenant knows a hell of a lot less about how to run a platoon than a 30-year-old master sergeant. It's in the same way that the Army's known for years, you need to pay attention to those master sergeants. We are looking for ways to empower our wage grade employees and help them advance.
That was good. I almost feel like I look at Vanessa and Brian. I feel like you guys are just like, you have so much to add. So I almost want to say, Vanessa, shall I turn it over to you? Was there anything that just, I feel like there's something on your heart. Anything you wanted to share on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Scott is just touching on a lot of great topics. I think there's a few different references that were going through my mind. Kind of around the bridges transition model where people are going through the change and the change is happening at one time, but they're transitioning at different periods, and kind of that's one thing to consider. Also David Rock's SCARF model of kind of how do we think about status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness as we're approaching these reskilling efforts. And then kind of one other reference that I think might be relevant is kind of, there's a book called Drive, and it talks about this, what motivates us. And the three main components are around autonomy, that we want to, take ownership over it and be self-directed. Mastery, that I want to get better skills and kind of improve my career trajectory, and then purpose, which I feel like the U.S. government has such a great opportunity to leverage kind of these important mission areas and motivate people through that piece of it. And then I think that as we bring these concepts back to reality of what does that mean for reskilling efforts, as you're putting together, IDPs or a training curricula, then you really want to think about how to leverage adult learning principles and allow for that psychological safety for people to be comfortable experimenting and, even making mistakes as they're learning these different concepts. And then, as we're thinking about the design of the training, we're not just putting people into lectures, we're allowing for hands-on application, these gamification concepts, sandbox environments, and just allowing people to really have these opportunities that are non-traditional, whether it's mentoring or job rotations, project-based learning of how do I get in there and start playing with something, as opposed to kind of sending adults back to the classroom to kind of take notes and sit there quietly. So those were a few reactions. I'll hand it back over to Brian.
Those are excellent. Both, I'm lucky to be on this panel because we have found through exit surveys and other means that, the statement, we need to compete financially with the private sector is one that we're pushed aside for the time being. It doesn't mean that it's not important to give pay and good parking spots and nice cubicles to our personnel, but they care about those three things that Vanessa just rattled off, and the last one being purpose. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people and they say, look, I love my job, but like, I wish that the senior leaders used what I do more. And you know, meaningful work is something that we found to be a real big, important aspect of this. And that's how you, in many ways, that's how you sell Quantum Leap, is you say, look, we want you to provide meaningful work to your senior leaders 5-10 years down the road. Not to say your work is not meaningful now, but anybody who's wise, reading the newspaper or magazines or anything, knows that the skills need to change to meet the future environment. And so, you know, once they accept that, then they understand why we're doing the shift. And then they say, okay, I want to be part of that future in the Army. And that meaningful work, that purpose, as Vanessa said, is very important. So I've tried to tell my staff to stay away from saying things like, we need to compete with the salaries in industry. I mean, it'd be great, but the purpose of government was never to compete with industry. That's my theory. We were built to fill the holes where the market wouldn't provide a service or a good in an efficient manner, where people might free ride off of different things. And I'm an economist, so I think that way, but we really need to think more about providing that meaningful work. Vanessa hit on it. The government has plenty of opportunities to do that. Think about the special things we can do that are legal from a cyber or AI perspective in the future. It's going to be pretty outstanding. We just need to make sure that we communicate that to our workforce. And Vanessa, you get extra kudos because you have the book, How Much Is Enough, on your bookshelf back there. And as a former CAPE analyst in OSD, that's the #1 book in my opinion.
I love this. So much panelist love, and from the attendees too. I will keep the compliments going. Scott, this was from my new friend Will, who just said superb to your comment. I think Will felt this in his core, because Will said, I myself migrated from WG to GS and am now empowered to make a difference. So really, Will wants to see that comment kind of synthesized and distributed government-wide for a communication forum, because I think what you're describing is not just an interior issue, and that really spoke to Will and I'm sure a lot of other people. So thank you for bringing that up, and hopefully there will be more opportunities in a government-wide forum for that to be shared.
Absolutely.
Good. You all, I cannot believe we only have 3 minutes left. I'm really sad and devastated about that. But I will ask this question, and we'll see if this leads us to wrap up or if I can squeeze in more time. But if each of you could kind of describe what does a future state of your organization look like? How does the makeup of the workforce change? Is it more diverse? Are there things that you see your organization able to do better or do at all in the future because of reskilling and upskilling that you can't currently do today? So kind of like showing us ultimately, here's what we will be able to do that we couldn't before, or where we're heading. I'll start with you, Scott. Do you want to kind of give us a...
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate the question. So what I would hope for Interior 5 or 10 years from now is that we have a workforce that is much more experientially diverse. As I mentioned earlier, we've got 10 bureaus. Frankly, over the last 160 years, they've had a tendency to trip over one another and to not understand each other's culture, each other's mission, each other's goals, each other's standard operating procedures. So I would hope that perhaps 10% of our workforce, maybe 15% of our workforce, will have worked for more than one of our bureaus and would feel comfortable charting a career that would allow them to move back and forth from one bureau to the next over time. I think we'd end up with providing much better citizen service to the American people as a result of that. We'd spend a lot less time in internal bureaucratic fights, and we'd operate much more efficiently because we'd have employees who would be able to intuit where their sister bureaus were coming from and how to literally talk effectively in the language that is used in those other bureaus.
Perfect. And Vanessa, what do you see on the horizon as, giving us that government-wide perspective where things are headed?
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, I think that we know that diverse organizations are more successful. I think the challenge is, how do we leverage that diversity in a decision-making process that is agile, allowing the government to operate faster and make more data-driven decisions. So I'll give you 1 minute back to spare.
Bring us home, Brian. Where are things heading? Paint the picture for us of Army of the future.
Yeah, my panelists said it very well. The diversity is a key. We're lucky in the Army. We have a very diverse workforce relative to the average workforce, in the sense that many of the civilians and contractors who I work with and lead are from all over the country. They have very different backgrounds. We've learned that through recent initiatives where we're talking with our people more in a thing called This Is My Squad. Google it and you'll see that everybody up to the chief of staff of the Army is doing it. And with all the unrest and things going on in our country, it's been an extremely valuable experience. So we've talked about the value of diversity. And really, I think what we're trying to do here with Quantum Leap is it's one piece of a broader strategy. As I mentioned, the Quantum Leap part is really focused on the people who are already doing civilian IT work today. Those are our existing workforce. But where we need skills that are a lot harder to transform those existing folks, that's where we go out and recruit and retain. And so you kind of got to think about it in that packaged deal there. The way I've described it is the skills that are a lot harder to turn our existing workforce in. We just got to go out to the academia and industry folks and say, we have a high demand for these skills. But the ones we can transform and the ones that we can get our employees excited to transform into, we want to do in-house. We want to give them that first opportunity. And I like the way Scott described it. It's not diversity necessarily by gender or age, or it is that, but it's also in the experiences that they have, the training they have, the skills they've acquired. And so that's what we're focused on. And it's been a great panel. So thanks so much, Alyssa. I appreciate it.
Perfect. All right, Scott is tuning out, but thank you, Scott, Vanessa, Brian, y'all are amazing. Thank you for all who tuned in. And I think I will turn it back over to Tom to close us out.
Thank you, Nicole. That was a fantastic panel. I think what Scott said, every agency is the same. It should be like a one Department of Interior. It should be like a one GSA, because when you look at Department of Interior, when you look at these departments, they're doing a lot of complementary, similar type work. And Brian, I liked what you said about meaningful work. I've always found it intuitively in my career that when you give people training and you give people meaningful work, they don't go get other jobs. They want to stay with you. They don't want to go to some place where they're not going to get this. And if they're in the government anyway, they're mission focused. It's not all about the extra money on the paycheck. They want to get sense of satisfaction. And if you don't stick them in a side room somewhere where they don't do any interesting work, they'll probably stay with you. So good stuff. I really like that panel. And thank you all for joining us. We had some great participation and the audience was fantastic. And most of you stuck around for 2 hours during lunch. So, and just to let you know, this is going to be, we're not just one and done with this reskilling effort. And it's basically, we have 5 pillars: one, cybersecurity; one is DevOps; one is cloud and infrastructure; one is going to be digital; and then 1A is AI and data analytics. I basically want to have like a reskilling component to each of those. So please get involved with ATARC. Get back. We'd love to talk to you about it. But I think reskilling is such an essential cross-functionality type of thing to each of our verticals. So fantastic day, kicking off with Robin, and then Nicole, and then Nicole show. I think they both did a great job orchestrating a great discussion. And then lastly, please sign up for a Roadmap to Resiliency, the series that we're doing with Jonathan Album, who's the moderator. He's at ServiceNow, great person, and a couple of CIOs that we're working with that are doing some very interesting work. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and have a great week.